We should get going. It's already a little afternoon, I think. Yep. How's everyone? Great. Yeah. Having a good day? Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate that you take your time from all the wonderful events to be here. How many is this your first time in El Salvador? It's my first time. Great, okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I'm assuming you all love it too. So my talk today is about Bitcoin aligning incentives. So I talk about a lot of things online, mostly Bitcoin, of course, lots of different vantage points and perspectives, hopefully many of them interesting. But today's a little different, I suppose. And I suppose I'm doing that because here in El Salvador, I feel that this is something that's especially touching to where we are. It's especially touching to where we are in this moment in history, or at least I think so. And I think it's really important to talk about. So what I've really enjoyed about being here in El Salvador so much thus far is just the beauty, natural beauty, the food, the people, the culture. You know, obviously, last 2 days we've been stuck in this hotel, but I spent a few days in El Zante. We're going there later tonight again. So I've really loved it. And to me, it emphasizes that the things that we really value in life are not the numbers that we call money. They're not the number of units or currency or whatever. It's the stuff that is what we use to consume. It's what we use to eat. It's our time. It's our family and our loved ones. And so to me, that's the hope with Bitcoin. It's not just a new series of numbers, but that it can help enable more of that prosperity, more of that absolute purchasing power. So I'm going to compare fiat and Bitcoin, why I think Bitcoin's set of numbers is more moral and more fair and more equal. So essentially, if we all want those things, if we all want that prosperity for ourselves, for our future selves, for our children, we all want to be able to communicate those numbers and communicate to each other what is valuable to us, right? It's the way in which we communicate what's valuable to each other. And so obviously barter was the main system in which we did that until obviously then we had to find a way to have an increased amount of scarcity in order to communicate what is relatively abundant in terms of that. And so what we did, my example here, what we did is we created political currency. I've got a $100 US bill and 100 Venezuelan bolivars, right? So these are political currencies. These are sets of numbers, ones and zeros, and I would argue that this is a technological innovation. A lot of Bitcoiners, think that this is, evil and, dust or whatever, worthless, and I agree, but at the same time, this is, in my opinion, a technological innovation. This is better than just going out and bartering and hoping that we have, coincidence of once that we want the same thing. And so this is what we had for a very, very long period of time. We have to have something that's more abstract and more scarce than things in real life. And so the only thing more scarce than things in our real life are numbers. And so what we do is we create a board of people or an individual or group of individuals that creates a set of numbers. And they say, these are the numbers that are scarce, right? And we trade those for the things that we actually care about. It's not the numbers. This is things we actually care about. And so my coming to Bitcoin journey, let's say, my understanding of Bitcoin was really realizing that this is an innovation, yes, in comparison to the past or hunter-gatherer days, farming days, and all that, but it's really archaic. It really has this fundamental technological flaw that up to this point in history we've not been able to figure out yet. And that is the problem of conflicting interests. And that's what I believe Bitcoin solves, which I'll get to in a minute. But the problem here is that if you have an entity, if you have a group of people that are defending the scarcity of these numbers, well, then simultaneously you've created two different classes, two different tiers. You have the people that are the creators and the managers and the distributors of the numbers, and then you have the users of the numbers, everyone else. And so inherently, fundamentally, built into the technological system itself, you have these two competing forces that are always going to be in conflict with each other perpetually into the future. The people, I'm an American, obviously. How many of you are Americans in here, right? That you actually use dollars? Okay, yeah, so a good number of you. So for me, for example, I'm over here in America with my American political currency units, my ones and zeros that we create. I'm very close to the creators of our numbers. And then I come down here to El Salvador. There's many of you Americans, lots of people here from Europe, a few of you from Asia, all over the world coming down here. And our numbers are worth more here. So that is essentially a form of theft, right? In that I am a perpetrator of this theft, and I'm also a victim, because I'm not the one that creates the numbers. I'm not the very foundation or choke point. So I am both a victim and a perpetrator, right? And I think that's how we all are, that we don't have an alternate set of numbers because this is the best we have, or it's the best we've had up to this point. And so if I think, or when I was thinking about, okay, where does this all lead? Where does this go? To me, I looked at history and it became clear that, oh, we keep getting to the same end result. We keep coming to the similar, very limited set of outcomes that seem basically inevitable. And I would argue because it's a systemic flaw in the technology. If I am on the side of creating the numbers and distributing the numbers, and you are on the side of receiving the numbers, well, then inherently there's only one of two ways this can end, right? Either I keep creating more numbers and I can no longer acquire your stuff, or we bring out the guns, because that's really what backs the money. That's really what backs it. If you have a central group of power enforcing the scarcity of those numbers, what defends that? It's the barrel of a gun, right? So to me, those are the only two ways in which these things end. And I think history speaks to that very well. That either we keep creating the numbers perpetually, hyperinflation, or we no longer agree on those numbers and we resort to war. We resort to the energy that backs those numbers, which is the barrel of a gun. So I look at where we are today. I think about myself as an American and all of us as Americans in here. We come from America over 80 years. You know, we've had the dominant series in numbers in the world, like many others before us. But simultaneously, we know that they also trend bolivars over time. The only question is timing, right? If I am perpetually incentivized to create these numbers, then my incentive is not in the best interest of your incentive. And so, to me, when I look at that problem, I think, okay, most people are attributing these tensions and these misalignments and these failures of misaligned incentive structures, they're attributing it to conspiracy theories or to bad politicians or the system or the courts or this country or this or that. And while that's all true, and perhaps at varying degrees of correctness, I think it's a much more fundamental problem. I think fundamentally, the reason why Bitcoiners are so passionate about Bitcoin is because they understand that this is not a Republican or Democrat or a communist versus or a fascist or democracy or monarchy. You know, these are all different manifestations of the same technological problem. We've not had a way to distribute numbers that we call money in an effective way where there's no central point in control. And so I think it's fundamentally a technological problem, which is much more subtle and much more nuanced than just wanting to blame a different ethnicity or a different country or a different politician or the person or the group that you don't like. I think it's more subtle than that, but I think it's far more concerning and far more devastating because of the inevitability of it. It's just game theory. It's just fundamental base layer reality. It's not some lever that can just be pulled in your direction. Now everything's magically fixed from the top down. It's a fundamental technological failure from the bottom up. And that's why I think Bitcoin's really important. Because I think there are only two solutions. Like I said before, this ends in one of two results, either hyperinflation or war. But I think there's only one of two solutions. The first solution is all humans become moral, right? All humans become without sin. All humans have perfect hearts forever in time, right? Kumbaya, right? So basically, we have a group of people in charge of the numbers, and we all say, you know, we're never going to increase the number of currency units. I am never going to pretend that I'm a monetary god and create numbers out of thin air in exchange for your real goods, your real services, and your real labor at my direct benefit, your direct expense. That's theft, right? And so that's not going to happen, right? Everyone obviously knows that that's not going to happen. So the only other possible solution, because we're in that fallen world, the only other possible solution I can conceive of is finding a technological improvement to this. In the same way that fiat currency, aka by decree, with the barrel of a gun, of course, fiat is an innovation on barter, but likewise, the only solution to this technological problem, in my view, is finding a technological solution, and that's Bitcoin. You know, the cypherpunks and the computer geeks would call it the double spend problem. You know, economists would call it a different problem. You know, we can call it whatever we want, but fundamentally, I think Bitcoin is a technological fix to this technological problem. Because now, as an American, right now, my incentive with my political currency is to acquire it as fast as possible, as soon as it's minted, as soon as it's created, faster than the kids here in El Salvador, right? You know, we've gone out, we've gone to the beaches, we've gone around town the last few days here, we've met lots of locals. You know, my incentive is right now to be as close to that money printer as possible. And so I don't really care from a incentive game theory perspective. I don't really care what their incentive is because it's not necessarily aligned. And so I believe the only way to remedy that, the only way to fix that, the only way to work together in that sense is to have that technological solution at which there's not the currency creators and the currency users, but instead everyone is a user and no one is a creator. Likewise, Satoshi, I don't think was divine. I don't think was, some person any more moral than any of us, but I think Satoshi had a vision, and his vision was, we create the system that makes the numbers, and there's no human that can control it, that can distort it or debase it in the future. And so, including himself. And we saw that with the block size wars, of course, Bitcoin's own trying to destroy it. But all that to say is that to me is what is so meaningful about being here. That's why I'm so passionate about being here. I think for so many of you, that's what's so exciting. And so for me personally, when I think about why I'm here because I love it. I enjoy it, right? I get to network. Hopefully, this increases my reputation. People are, recording this. Hopefully people watch it online. It's in my self-interest to come to these events and to talk and to share my perspectives and my message and hopefully get more eyeballs on me and my content and my name. But simultaneously, I believe it's good for others because I'm helping others when I'm here. We're having dinners and doing business deals and thinking about things and creating ideas. And likewise, I have friends I come here and I visit, I hang out with. And so from a friendship perspective, I really love it and enjoy it. And likewise, because I'm bringing my numbers, because I'm bringing my purchasing power here, as little as it may be, aggregated out to the hundreds and hundreds of us here for a week or more, that's a real impact on the local economy. And so when I think of myself, why I'm so passionate or obsessed about Bitcoin is because I think for me on a personal level, there are so many layers of that incentive alignment that keep me passionate and keep me always perpetually interested because yes, it's in my own best interest, my own self-interest to stack as many sats as possible, as it is for all of you, to make as much money as possible, to increase your own purchasing power as much as possible. But the beauty with knowing that the system that the children here in El Salvador are now using, or are hopefully going to increasingly be using, is not going to steal from them in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, then you realize, wait a second, now me also come here is not just my own self-interest of wanting to enjoy the beautiful weather here, but it's also in the interest of them, knowing that what I'm doing, hopefully, is bringing better economic opportunities for them, both in the present and the future. Which then gets back to my own self-interest, because if I know that they're not going to be stolen from, well then, when my kids or my grandkids come along, what if some invention, discovery, or innovation that the kids here make eventually impacts my kids? And we don't have that with fiat, because our incentive right now as Americans, and this is not an anti-American stance, again, it's a technological problem, is that we have a higher degree of wealth and purchasing power than the rest of the world. And so because we have that, we have the bigger gun, therefore we get to decree the numbers, we get to make the numbers. So we give our currency units here, we dilute their currency in exchange for some of their purchasing power, for some of their labor, and some of their wealth, disproportionately their direct expense. And so then our pile gets a little bit bigger. And so it gets bigger and bigger. We have a greater ability to create this. So we don't have that. But that is what's so exciting about me being here and being able to see that and being able to enjoy that in person. And so for me, that's what keeps me up at night. That's what keeps me excited. And that's what keeps me really optimistic. Knowing that, if there's 21 million Bitcoin, which we know there are 21 million Bitcoin, and there's 5 billion adults in the world, 200 million of those adults is 4% the world population. You just aggregate the math out, and pretty much everyone here at this conference, we know if they buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, self-custody Bitcoin properly for a long enough time horizon, well then yeah, theoretically we all should only perpetually get richer and richer with a higher and higher degree of prosperity perpetually into the future. 1 million sats, 100,000 sats, maybe even less than 100,000 sats could be significant amounts of money in the future. But the beauty is that, yeah, sure, we're all here to get rich, but at the same time, we don't get rich unless we also help our neighbors get rich, unless we also help them get rich, unless we help them prosper in the future. And so aligning those incentives with the monetary network that inherently doesn't have that fundamental issue, I think is a really big deal, both for us, for our neighbors, for the world's poorest people. 500 million, 600, 800 million or so, less than a billion, that's for sure, people in the world have property rights. And so I look at this from a futurist or a technologist perspective, and I think it's taken us 4,000 years to get to 500 million people with property rights. What if this digital magic internet money, this simply slightly different numerical system, also money, but a different incentive structure, what if this could onboard the next 2 billion people, the next 3 billion people, perhaps even 5 billion people or more to having property rights? essentially, what if we could 10x the number of humans innovating and discovering and creating in the future? I think that's a wonderful and a beautiful thing. And I think that that is the bullish case for Bitcoin. It's not saying, oh, Bitcoin's going to $10 million, $100 million in terms of these, right? Because these ultimately, these dollars, as we all know, trend to the bolivars, right? That's the incentive. And so we know that humans will always follow their incentives and they'll always trend towards that. And so to me, that's the bullish case for Bitcoin. It's not that, oh, it's going to be a perpetually higher price in terms of a numerical system that's perpetually worth less and less, but it's that, what if we could 10x the number of productive humans, the 10x the amount of intelligence, 10x the amount of people that are prospering on this planet, and then have more and more innovations that contribute to that? And I think that's really true. You know, on the negative side, like I'm saying with fiat, I create the numbers, I distribute the numbers. One of only two end results is hyperinflation or war, right? And as many of you have probably heard before, but I think it's worth saying again, is that 98% of the nations, empires, or systems that hit 130% sovereign debt to GDP end in hyperinflation, default, or war within 15 years, right? And America hit that 3 years ago. So obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that everything comes crumbling down in any specific timeline, but my point is that if we know this is a technological problem, and we know this is an incentive structure problem, and we know that humans will always follow that incentive structure, and we know that 98% of the time that we've hit these markers that we hit 3 years ago, that the game ends in a relatively short period of time after that, to me it becomes really urgent as to why Bitcoin needs to be talked about, why Bitcoin needs to be adopted, and why Bitcoin is a sponge for everyone to direct their resources to. If I'm the printer of currency, well, now I can, instead of printing and dumping my currency onto the users, I can just exchange it in acquiring Bitcoin and let that be the infinite sponge that soaks away infinite currency. Or likewise, if I'm the people, the victims, the users that are being stolen from day after day after day, well, now I don't necessarily have to rise up with my guns and begin a conflict. I can just opt out peacefully, non-violently, into something that can actually preserve my property rights without the need of bullets and bandages. And so I think both for the victims and the perpetrators, I think for everyone across the planet, this is the most urgent way in which to divert that tension that's rising and rising and rising atop fiat currency, divert that attention over. And so that's a little doom and gloom, it's a little negative, but in a more positive sense, I think about energy. 4.6 million people every year freeze to death needlessly because energy costs keep going up perpetually. And they will only continue to keep going up perpetually because we'll always demand to save our credit markets, right? And so I look at that and I think, what if just 10% of those preventable losses of life are prevented from a monetary system that doesn't have that technological exploit, where humans can leverage that system to steal and destroy the wealth of others? I mean, that's, what, 500,000 people a year, 460,000 people a year? Aggregate that over 100 years, that's 46 million people, and that's just 10%. If we're looking at 20, 22%, something like that, compounded out, what happens to the world if 100 million lives are saved purely just from reducing energy costs slightly from adopting a new monetary system? And then you have the food, then you have the education, then you have the defunding of tyrannies and terrorists and dictatorships, all those things in the future. But even just 100 million people, that's a profound impact. That's a massive amount of opportunity and wealth brought to Africa, to Latin America, to Asia, to the whole world, including the West, including America. That's very profound to me, and it's very moving to me. And that's why I'm thrilled to be here to talk about Bitcoin, share my thoughts, meet so many great Bitcoiners. I've met so many people that are building businesses here and investing. And it's like, again, it's about aligning incentives. Yes, they're here for profit. Yes, they're here, they want to make money. Yes, they're here because they want to get rich and increase their purchasing power. But they're also creating jobs. They're also improving their environments, improving housing conditions. And so to me, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. That's why I'm here. I hope that's why you're all here. And so I suppose my message and my encouragement for you all is to really embrace that your desire to profit atop a system that only benefits those that in a free market bring value to other people. To me, that's really exciting. And I think we've lost that a lot with political money, with fiat currency, because profiting, not always, but very often, is a result of directly harvesting wealth from someone else or indirectly harvesting wealth from someone else. And because Bitcoin doesn't have that exploit, to me, that's my encouragement, to go out, build businesses, bring value, talk about Bitcoin, share it with others, and simultaneously feel encouraged that if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing the moral thing, if you're treating your fellow neighbor as yourself and you're loving them, then you are very probably going to profit, and they are too, and which then benefits your kids. And ultimately, that's what it's about. That's why I'm here. It's not about me acquiring more numbers. It's the whole reason we do this, the whole reason we save money is for our kids, is it not? It's for our future. And so, in my view, the best way to help our kids and help our grandkids is to help in the future, is to help the kids of today and other places in the world that have been much less fortunate to us. So that's why I care about Bitcoin. That's why I'm passionate about it. And I'm really glad to see you all here. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. Great. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. I don't know how much time we have. Okay, yeah, we've got like 5 minutes for questions or so. I don't know what you would want to ask me, but I'm happy to share my thoughts. So, anyone? If not, that's okay too. Thank you.
Do you have any idea across what kind of time frame realistically that Bitcoin might reach what could be called mass adoption, some kind of realistic way that would begin to impact some of the things that you just talked about in terms of the global benefits that it could bring?
Well, I think in one sense it's already happening. I mean, if you're on a Bitcoin standard today, you're already reaping the benefits of the future today. It's like I'm on a Bitcoin standard, like the collapse of fiat doesn't necessarily impact me. Obviously it does, but at the same time it doesn't, because I'm with Bitcoin, like in my social layer, I'm with Bitcoiners, in my personal monetary layer, like in my worldview, everything is already collapsing. My housing costs, my energy costs, my food, like, so for me, the future is already now, right? And so I think in many ways it's already here. But yeah, globally, I think it'll take a long time. I think most people will have to learn through pain. You know, I mean, we could see Argentina or Lebanon. You know, yeah, they're having higher rates of adoption, or even here in El Salvador. You know, this is a real example here. Is that there's a greater amount of economic pain here than in Michigan, where I'm from, and so adoption is accelerating here compared to there, but still, it's nowhere near 100%. So I think it'll take a long time, but yeah, I think it'll take a long time. So. Yeah.
Can you narrow it down to the United States? Do you think it's going to be by states, or the adoption is going to be within all of them? What do you think?
What's going to be by state?
The adoption of it.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I talked to some guys from North Carolina. Like, there's some states leapfrogging other states. North Carolina, Texas, and a few others are leapfrogging California and New York. But I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. I think the Robert Kennedy and the other presidential candidates, I think that's really interesting, not because, I'm idolizing a politician, but like it's already being stated in presidential candidates that by president, like, what if we back our treasuries with Bitcoin? Like, that's a really big deal. It's like, if I'm the creator of a currency, why don't I just create more of my political currency units, more of my numbers, acquire the Bitcoin, use the Bitcoin to back my currency? It's essentially what Michael Saylor did with his stock. Dump as much of your own stock as you can, acquire Bitcoin. And so it's like, I think it's very interesting, because I think that's like hyperbolic adoption there, at least in the nation state. So yeah, I don't know.
If the incentives are so much different with the dollar compared to Bitcoin, and we build civilization on top of that is really structured. Does everything have to crumble down? Does everything have to crumble down before everything starts to get built up on the incentive structure?
I think it'll bifurcate. I think it'll be like two different worlds. Like, I think we already feel it, because like at these events, everyone's happy, everyone's positive, there's so many differing political, religious, and philosophical worldviews in this room even, and across the conference. It's like we have such a different mentality, in my opinion, than the rest of the world. I think that's only going to get more and more extreme. For everyone that's not in Bitcoin, housing will only become more expensive perpetually forever. Same with food, same with energy, same with education, same with everything else. And likewise in Bitcoin, I think it'll just get better. So I think yes, but I don't think it's going to be like the whole world collapses and the whole world builds back up. I think it's going to be like two different worldviews, right? I mean, the same thing with the internet, right? You had the people that adopted the internet, where everything got better and better and better for them with more and more opportunities, and then you had the other world, the ancient world, that just eventually dissolved until, nobody paid attention anymore, right? So.
How do you reduce the dependency on the US dollar, and the way it benefits some? How can you do that in mass?
Well, the brutal truth is that, like I said, I mean, I view all of us as actively, I have dollars. I have dollars in my bank account. I'm spending dollars here. It's like I'm keeping that system alive. We all are. But at the same time, it's reducing that as much as possible and increasing my Bitcoin energy savings and attention as much as possible, right? Because I think for every person individually and the world as a whole, it's not going to be a overnight switch. I think it's going to be gradual. So that's just me.
My biggest worry, this is going to sound dumb, is that the price goes up so high and so rapidly that it's not going to be distributed enough among the people that need it the most. And in this cycle that we're seeing the big boys coming, the ETFs and the Wall Street people, and then the people who really need it the most are going to be kind of left out, or are going to be buying Bitcoin at a price that they're not going to be able to enjoy the benefits that we talked about, or at a lesser extent had they bought at the current prices.
No, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think my perspective of that would be that if you're operating within Bitcoin, the only way to acquire more Bitcoin is either to buy it, or farther and farther in the future we go, it'll be more and more so the only way is to provide value to someone else, right? With political currency, right? Again, either I create the numbers and I steal from you indirectly, or we settle this with guns and I steal from you directly, right? But with Bitcoin, even if it is highly centralized, I think that over time it will naturally become more and more decentralized, because if I have a significant amount of Bitcoin and I want stuff in the world, the only way for me to do that is to spend my Bitcoin, which then naturally distributes it. And so, I mean, yeah, it could be argued that's the theory and it's too far in the future to picture that. But I mean, I look at the last 14 years, and it's only become more and more equalized, more and more decentralized. And so I think if we can go from the average person buying 10,000 Bitcoin in a single transaction to 1% or 2% of a coin, it's like I think it'll just continue from there. Or at least that's my hope. I think it will. And I hope they suppress price. I actually hope that, because the more they suppress price with fake paper ETF Bitcoin, the more affordable Bitcoin is for all of us. The real stackers, decentralize it faster, which then ironically, accelerates adoption, in my opinion. So one more. Do we have time for? Yeah.
Back to your comments about incentives. The fiat system is based on trust, and Bitcoin is based on being trustless. And do you believe we're at like peak fiat because the people who control it are losing trust and forced to lie about almost every metric in the economy, and all the statistics are basically fake, fudged? And do you believe like that's going to be the driver? Is the people who are the top of the currency going to ruin it and drive people into a trustless system?
Yeah, I think they'll ruin it. The question was, do I think the people in charge of fiat money will ruin it? And yeah, I think they do, because I don't think they have another option, right? I mean, they can't stop. They have to keep going. And so you're right. Money is just trust. Right now, like the only difference between, I've said this like 3 times now, but the only difference between American dollars and Venezuelan bolivars is that there's more trust in America's system. Like, these are both the same paper. Like, it's just made up. Like, this is the magic internet money, right? I mean, this is a paper version of it, but right? Like, this is the magic internet money by decree. And so it's all about that trust. And people prefer the dollar because these are both the same technological system, and this is simply the longest time chain, if you want to use that metaphor, right? This is what has that most trust, because it's got the biggest guns backing it. And so I think most people are flocking to that because, yeah, America has its problems, but everywhere else the problems are worse. And so I think the big awakening will be when they realize, oh, there's a new technological system, a new way I can trust. And I think, and this is perhaps a good place to end on, but I think the irony of having money you don't have to trust, but you can verify, I think increases trust among all of us, right? I mean, it's like Bitcoiners, we trust people really quick if we know they're a Bitcoiner, right? Perhaps too much, but but it's great. It's wonderful. So, yeah, I think you're right. So, okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.